Hi folks, Rob here. How y'all doing? Recently, last Wednesday, it's Sunday now, last Wednesday, I was involved in a traffic stop. I was traveling in a vehicle in the passenger seat, although I wasn't a paying passenger, and we got pulled over. I posted a video. It received considerable hits. I was quite surprised. It's got like 12,000 hits in 4 or 5 days. A lot of people were asking questions. What brought about the stop? What happened afterwards? We were stopped. The cop claimed that he had witnessed us, or he had witnessed the operator of the car, the traveler, tailgating and passing on the shoulder. He did not witness any such thing. I would testify to that. If, however, I was also asked, did it happen previously, I would have to testify that yes, it did. Sorry, Tom, truth is the truth. Tom's a good guy. I like him a lot. He's a buddy of mine. He's a friend, but I do not like the way he travels. He tailgates too often. He passes on the shoulder, and he does a lot of things that make me white knuckle it sometimes. This has nothing to do with his free man status. This, I believe, is simply a function of youth. He's a younger guy, and I've chewed him out about his driving or his traveling habits. So what likely happened is the police got a 911 call about a cop car looking car tailgating and passing on the shoulder. Complaints were made, calls were made. The police officer pulled in behind us. We saw him. The actions were modified, let's say, and the cop made claims which we know were untrue. Now, he seemed like a decent enough cop. I didn't like there's a couple of problems. One, police don't have the right to initiate an investigation like that. They don't have a right to lie right out. And when you do lie outright like that, you really erode public faith and confidence in the police. The police need to enjoy the ethical and moral high ground. They need to follow procedural correctness. And when you don't do that, our respect for you erodes. Likely he's not a bad guy, not a bad cop. He's just in a frustrating situation where he's not supposed to be initiating investigations himself. That's what he claims happened. You're not supposed to be lying about what you witness, even though you're confident that those actions did happen. You didn't witness it, but someone else did and called in. You shouldn't be lying like that. And most importantly, I didn't like him threatening me with arrest for speaking. He's conducting an investigation. I was trying to provide him with information relevant to his investigation, and in order to shut me up, he threatens me with arrest. Now, here's the thing. I understand you guys got a difficult job. These cops have a difficult job. But just because you're conducting an investigation doesn't mean there's an automatic suspension of all human rights whilst you conduct your investigation. And sometimes you are going to be called to conduct your investigations in very high noise environments. Deal with it. You got no right threatening me. Now, he didn't scare me at all. He didn't anger me. I sensed a certain amount of professionalism from him. I didn't see an angry man itching for violence at all. And when we left, we ended up traveling away, got some tickets, traveled away. He gave us a salute, which I don't know if it was, I'm sure it was part hamming for the camera, but part I sensed, I don't know, it was a peaceful, respectful gesture, I felt. I didn't take it like he wasn't thumbing his nose at us or anything, or maybe there was a slight hint of mockery in it. But I wasn't offended by his salute at all, and I returned it. I don't know what some people believe about Freeman, but I'll tell you this about myself. I actually like police officers, good police officers. I have met a whole bunch of them across this country in my years of activism. Many of them have made me feel both humbled and hopeful. They've earned my respect and my admiration. I've spoken to many of them, tried to understand their perspective. They are often told to do things a certain way without being told why they're supposed to do it that way. We often put them in a very difficult situation, this traffic stop being one of them, say. If my friend was in fact traveling dangerously and this officer wanted to address that, And yet the way the system is set up, he has to either witness it himself or have someone willing to testify. And a little bit of gray area, it's a little bit easier, a little white lie, and the danger is addressed, but it's addressed at the cost of public faith and confidence in the constabulary. Now, my real issue with this stop, now what happened, he stopped and it's all, you know, pretty calm. Other cop cars show up. Now, I saw no need for 3-4 cop cars, so I wanted to get a supervisor online. I didn't have the phone number for his direct, I didn't have his direct phone number, so I did what I felt was reasonable, logical, and lawful within the circumstances. I phoned 911, directed them to connect me to dispatch immediately or to a supervisor. They said they didn't have that capability, and they gave me the required number. I said thank you, hung up, and then called for the supervisor. Now, calling 911, calling for the cops, using 911 to call for the cops when there's already police there, I can see that as an abuse. Calling 911 to get a number you don't have so you can immediately talk to a supervisor so that I could inform them that we were peaceful individuals, that there would be no need for violence, that if necessary, if arrests were necessary, it would be done peacefully under protest and duress, and that there was a peace officer, myself, in the car with a videotape happening, so you should probably act at the highest capacity that you're capable of. Well, cop number 2 shows up in his ETF uniform, his little militarized wing nuttery, and bangs on the window. Oh, you called 911, and that's the video I posted, that interaction with him. Him I didn't like. He angered me. I'll tell you why. One, he scared the shit out of me. He terrorized me. I didn't know whether or not I was about to have the window broken, dragged out. I had a violent sociopath outside my window banging on my door. He made me feel powerless. The fact that he's in a uniform, he's got a taser where his micropenis is, he's strapped, and he's got a bunch of friends. I felt powerless, and I did not like that. That angered me as well. But mostly what angered me was the fact that I'm a man of peace, and I tried to plant the seeds of peace, and he rejected it. In that video, you'll see he's saying, step out of the car so I can arrest you. I respond, am I under arrest? If he says, yes, I want to arrest you, I'm putting my finger out the window so he can simply touch it. That simple contact effects the arrest. I would submit peacefully under protest and duress, and at that point, not only does he not have the right to use violence against me, my health and welfare is his responsibility and his duty. However, the process of arresting, if you don't submit, can in fact induce violence. And here's what he was going to do. I looked in his eyes and I saw him. I'm pretty good at reading people, and I'll tell you what I saw when I looked in his eyes. An angry little boy with mommy issues, itching to hurt someone. That's what I saw. And that's what he tried to effect. Had I opened the door and obeyed his command to step out, here's what would have happened. He would have said, you're under arrest. He would have grabbed me and employed violence. He would immediately say, stop resisting. He'd throw me out of the view of the camera, start laying the boots to me, yell, ouch, you hit me, stop resisting, and I would face the 3 charges, what I call the 3 stooges. Obstruction, resisting arrest, assaulting a peace officer. I've talked to hundreds of people across this country. I know some people personally that this has happened to, where in failure to identify yourself and produce identification resulted in the cop claiming the right to charge for obstruction. You even pull your arm back and they go ballistic on you immediately, claim that you're resisting arrest, and if when you pull back you even touch them a little bit, oh, you're assaulting a peace officer. A buddy of mine, he's a musician, a very soft-souled individual, but he's got a big mouth. He's a little bit yappy. Hi, Jamin. And he doesn't like to take shit. But he's not a big guy. He's not a violent guy. He's a musician, a guitar player. And he was charged with these. He was facing the 3 stooges. He was charged with this in I believe, Kamloops. And then we're traveling, we're in Ontario, and the OPP will stop us and ask him about it. And when he mentioned, yeah, he was charged with obstruction and resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer, the cops looked at each other and kind kind of dismiss it. They know that these Three Stooges charges are out there. They use them all the time, and that's what jackboot, angry, steroid monkey asshat wanted to do to me. He wanted to pull me out of that car and lay a beating on me, and he wanted to abuse his powers of arrest in order to effect that. He's an ego-driven little angry child, and if he hasn't killed anyone in the line of duty yet, he's looking to do so. So you're warned about that guy. He's a wingnut. Now, here's a funny thing. What really angered me about it is people like that erode the public's confidence in the police. And all those good officers that I have met, he endangers their lives. The tragedy that happened in Moncton, here's what's really weird. I start writing a letter to the Toronto police about Officer Number 2 asshat's actions. I'm speaking about the militarization of the police and the effect that that has. When you militarize a police force, you're not creating a force of peace officers. You are, in fact, creating soldiers. And I was a soldier. I came very close to becoming an RCMP officer. I looked at it very deeply. I ended up meditating on it. Unbeknownst to me, I did some mushrooms on a beach, had an epiphany, and looked at it and decided I would be a really good cop, but I didn't want to carry a gun. I don't like what bullets do to living flesh. It's really ugly. People make really, really ugly, horrible noises when they've been shot. It's an ugly, ugly thing. And I didn't want to throw my fellow Canadians in jail or use the guns to do that for marijuana offenses. That to me was ludicrous. So that stopped me from becoming a member of the RCMP. The militarization, there's a different mindset between being a soldier, where your training is to close with and destroy an enemy, and a peace officer, where your goal is to preserve and maintain the public peace. One is all about overcoming conflict with violence, and the other one is all about overcoming conflict with compassion and dignity and respect. They're pretty much polar opposites. Militarized individuals need an enemy, and they will imagine or create him if they don't have one. They're not keeping the peace. And this leads to a division between the populace and the police officers. And this division, once it gets big enough, violent actions become justifiable in the minds of the less emotionally and intellectually developed people out there. And as I was writing those words, Justin Burke was going cop hunting. So I had to rewrite that letter. And I'm not justifying his actions at all. It's a heartbreaking tragedy. It breaks my heart. And I don't want this happening in my country. I worked very hard at trying to find the tools so that we can achieve a peaceful and a positive change. I don't see it happening with guns. And I don't want Canada to turn into a civil war. Very sorry for your loss, guys and girls. Peace officers out there, families of the slain victims. That's very sad to me, and I'm very sorry for your loss. And yet, it's so inevitable. It's predictable and inevitable when you militarize the police force. When you allow violent asshats like that to constantly abuse authority. And then there's the people out there who have been supportive of Burke and his actions and cheering him on. That to me is disgusting. What we need to do, I think, is bridge that gap, and that's what the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers, the organization we're setting up, was all about, is establishing the fact that peace officers can be hired by the people, from the people, and empowered not to enforce other legislation to collect taxes and revenue and enforce regulations, but merely stand as true peace officers, capable of witnessing and, if necessary, charging police officers when they do what Asshat did on Wednesday. And having spoken to cops, some good ones, And listening to the complaints of the people, there are people who are cheering this on, who they're cop haters, and the claim is that there are no good cops, because when bad ones do something, the other ones don't stand. And I think it's important that we understand what the perspective of those police officers who are doing nothing actually is. Now, I understand that it looks bad, and I believe that it is. I think they should be doing something. But if you talk to them and ask them why, A, they don't want to be serpicoed. They need their backup at times, and if they cross that blue line, then when they need the backup, it won't be there. They have families and mortgages and debts and obligations, and this is their job. And they do their best to do good within the job. And if they were to quit because they don't like the idea that if they cross the blue line they don't have support, then they are no longer a police officer and no longer in a position to do any good at all. And this perspective, to me, although it's a sad perspective, it speaks to a problem with our institution itself, does not identify them in any way as bad people in my book. And I think it's an understandable perspective. It's still something that needs to be addressed. Some people have been asking me why haven't I been making videos lately? Well, my father passed away, I had an epiphany, and I realized I don't want to spend my life fighting and in conflict, and that I didn't see that as the way to build something, to create something. We've been labeled as anti-government, but that's neuro-linguistic programming. When you use the word anti, you're describing someone. Subconsciously, you're going to think of someone who wants to destroy something, someone who wants to break something, someone who is against something. And if they described us as pro-good government, subconsciously, you would be looking at us as creators, as people who want to build something. And that's why they call us anti-government. We're not anti-government, we're pro-good government. The other reason was that there's a couple of forums, Randy Forum and Quatlusian forums, and these are some real, I don't know, there's some special people there. They like to attack me. If you want to see, endless ad hominem attacks, go there and you can listen to a bunch of cowards who post anonymously and who have never met me. You can read their opinions on me if you want. But they did say something. There was one post in particular that I had to look at and say, there's truth there, and I should study that. And essentially someone, I forget who, sorry, whoever it was, but thank you for this insight, stated that right or wrong, my political beliefs, my beliefs on the law and how government authority is achieved, the source, nature, and limits of government authority might not be within the mainstream. But right or wrong, I do truly believe I'm right. But right or wrong, the effect of putting this information out there, if it ends up having a negative effect, what is my liability in that? Ethically and morally. Legally, there's none. But ethically and morally, I would have an obligation to modify or mitigate or modify my words in order to mitigate any potential harm. I do see a truth, and I do want to share that truth, but I don't want to share it in a way that allows anyone to justify bringing violence to bear. And I was concerned about doing that, and I didn't want to do that. So all in all, with my epiphany, that I decided what I want to do with what limited time I've got on the planet, I want to make robots and movies about making robots to make movies. So I've spent the winter building my Ninja Goat, and I've got a couple of movie project scripts that I'm working on, and I'm going to make a couple of feature films with my Ninja Goats. And I think I can plant some better seeds that way, and some wider seeds, and I can make some money out of the deal. What I would like to do, part of these Randiates, one of the things they do is they question whether or not I am in fact a peace officer. Now, I've looked at this situation, the political landscape, if you will, the economical landscape, the laws under which we're forced to operate, the way the police are enforcing what they believe to be the laws. I see the militarization of the police, the growing division. I see a growing level of frustration within the people of Canada. I see them using the courts to try to find justice and finding absolutely none, because the police officers crossing the line are generating a lot of revenue for the courts. So I see a growing sense of frustration. Now, any society, it's been stated that a society needs both its protectors and its critics. The protectors will resist change. They're all about maintaining the status quo. And the critics are all about finding the problems with it and trying to fix it, change it. If either side has too much power, you have problems. If the protectors have too much power, there is no change, there is no growth, and you will end up with death by either stagnation or explosion. The pressure builds and you have violent revolution. If the change is too quick, if the critics have too much power, then your change is too quick and you lose stability. And so what we need to do is find a balance to that. The problems that I see are threefold. One, our form of government. It's archaic. The parliamentary form of representational government is absolutely archaic. It's hundreds and hundreds of years old. Look at the changes in everything from agriculture to medicine to zoology, communications, the internet. There is no need anymore for a parliamentary form of government. We have a right to direct democracy and self-government through direct democracy. We have the technological abilities for it, but no one in the present government speaks about it because they've been hijacked by corporations. So that's the big problem in that regard. And the remedy is, I believe, a Canadian People's Congress where we employ direct democracy. And I'll speak to that in a bit. The other problem I see is the courts. Now, if we establish a People's Congress, there's nothing stopping us from establishing a constitution and using that constitution to empower the creation and convening of People's Courts of Justice, within which there would be no fictions. Only people would have a voice, all people would be equal, everyone is bound by the criminal code, and no one gets to say, oh, I'm an agent for the crown, or I'm a corporation. It's all just people. I think that's what we need for people to find justice. You can't pit them against corporations when corporations have such bigger pockets. You can't claim that the crown empowered you to break the law, and when the crown is in fact an imaginary construct in your head. And there's no way to lawfully employ violence in a manner that will cause anyone to re-embrace these fictional imaginary constructs. Once people say, you know what, you're right, the crown is just a goddamn fiction. The crown in the right of the province of Ontario? What the hell is that? Oh, it's apparently a corporation providing de facto government services. You can't claim that these imaginary constructs give you power over your fellow man, and if you can't prove that that imaginary construct exists and the fellow man agrees to it. He's your Santa Claus, not mine. Don't claim he gives you any authority over me. So a People's Congress, I think, would address that. And a People's Court would allow people, to any human being, to bring any charges against any other human being. And if that human being thusly charged, whether they are a judge, a politician, a police officer, whoever, if their claim is, oh, I was doing what I was told by the crown, an imaginary construct, it would be seen as, oh, I was doing it because Santa Claus said I could. And these people would be held liable and accountable in a properly functioning court of law, convened lawfully and recognized internationally by the nation operating a direct democracy. The third problem is the militarization of the peace officers and the gap between the police and the people. And that, I believe, is addressed with the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers. I would much rather live in a community where everyone above a certain age establishes that they are in fact peaceful people and they swear to preserve and maintain the public peace. Now, there's questions as to whether or not I am in fact actually a peace officer. So hey, Quatlusian and Randiat members, here it is. The charge that I could face if I am not a peace officer is falsely representing that you are. Now, I have repeatedly represented myself as a peace officer publicly, openly, notoriously. I've done so to cops, judges, sheriff's deputies, crown counsels, judges, justices of the peace. I've sent letters to the head of the RCMP identifying myself as a peace officer. I am operating under contract, on my oath. I have ceremony, notice, and action. Everything necessary to be able to claim truthfully that I am in fact a duly sworn peace officer. So here it is. I hereby publicly represent. I do so openly, publicly, clearly, specifically, unequivocally, and notoriously that I am a peace officer with the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers. So you people on the Quatlousian forums who refuse to accept simple fundamental truths, bring this tape to the attention of whatever your nanny authority is and tell them that you want me charged for falsely representing myself as a peace officer. And when I don't face any charges, well, I guess you'll have to suffer your cognitive dissonance and you'll run around making up all sorts of stories. Now here's the thing. How can I be a peace officer? The Criminal Code of Canada defines a peace officer. And it defines a peace officer as a person hired to preserve and maintain the public peace. One of the posters on one of those forums, Mode, claims to be a lawyer and claims that the words, any person hired to preserve and maintain the public peace, actually means, and you need to be a lawyer to understand this, they then go and point to, I don't know, 3 or 4 other acts in different sections, and claims that those words, any person hired to preserve and maintain the public peace, actually means any person hired by the government under other legislation to preserve and maintain the public peace. And therefore, only the government has the right and the power to hire peace officers. I think that's ludicrous. I think the words say any person hired to preserve and maintain the public peace is pretty clear, and I don't think that you have the right to imply or assume that that hiring needs to be done by governmental authorities, corporations, like the corporation of the City of Toronto. The corporation can do it, but the people who empower the corporation can't. Yet that argument rests upon a belief that the people of Canada do not have the right to hire from amongst themselves people to preserve and maintain the public peace. It's completely ludicrous, and I reject it. So I am a peace officer. I'm representing myself as one, clearly, specifically, unequivocally, openly, publicly, and notoriously. And if you don't like it, report me and see what happens. This is clear test that I am in fact a peace officer. My goal with this, I don't want to field armed peace officers. And you know, one of the concerns that I've heard about, oh well, you can't just let the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers, you can't have a Corps of Peace Officers operated by the citizenry. It must be operated by the people in government, because as citizenry, it wouldn't be sufficient to be able to do it. Hey, just about anyone. They might hire anyone. You don't know who they'd hire. And we put our peace officers through a very rigorous training and psychological profiling to make sure that we get good officers. That's their argument, and guess what? That argument is shot to shit by the idiot asshat I dealt with on Wednesday. When you field officers like that, you have no right to argue whatsoever that you have concerns about who we might field as a peace officer. You have set the bar so incredibly low, you can't make that argument. I could go down to the local NA meeting, find a high school dropout with anger and mommy issues, give them half a day's training, a taser, and Mickey Mouse ears, and I could field a better peace officer than you did with that asshat. So don't ever tell me that you're concerned about who we might appoint, hire, or employ as peace officers. We've seen who you are employing. We've seen them engage in violence when it is uncalled for. So that's what happened. The goal that I am now on is getting established a Canadian People's Congress, getting people to choose direct democracy. And here's the thing, and here's the other argument. We have a right, according to the UN Charter of Human Rights, recognized internationally, that we have a right to govern ourselves either through representation in a democracy, either through representation or directly. People argue, oh, you want to get direct democracy happening, you have to start a political party, run for office, get control of the parliament, and then bring it in. Do you see how fundamentally ludicrous that argument is? You have a choice between A or B, but if you want B, you have to choose A. No. We have a right to establish a direct democracy right now. And the next movie I'm going to work on, the next little presentation, watch this space, it'll be a week or two, I got a bit of stuff ahead of me, is going to be an examination of how the people of Canada have a right to choose direct democracy, and how you do not need a majority to do this. You can do it with an incredibly small amount of people, really, and why the legal argument for this must exist. Furthermore, we are getting the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers. It's been in the wings for a bit. Thanks to my father, I inherited a little bit of money, enough to lay the foundation for a structure where we can go out and start hiring people to preserve and maintain the public peace, have a registry where we can, or a roll, where we can record their names and equip them with the tools and the equipment they need to police the police. This force of peace officers is not going to be armed at present. However, if their authority is not respected, if they are in fact assaulted by the existing police officers, there is nothing at law which says that our peace officers cannot be similarly equipped and armed as existing ones hired by corporate structures. I'm hoping we can avoid that. And all that would be required is for the existing police officers out there who are peace officers and policy enforcement officers, for them to recognize our officers' status as peace officers. If they do that, I don't see any need for an armed force. If they don't, I don't see how it's avoidable. It would end up being inevitable. Anyways, there was one other point. Oh yeah, the peace officer that I met, the first cop, he threatened to arrest my friend if he didn't, because he was a peace officer, threatened to arrest him if he failed to identify him to his satisfaction. Just so you know, sir, that's a two-way street when you're dealing with our peace officers. And if one of our peace officers ever identifies themselves to you as one, the tables will immediately be turned, and it will be demanded of you to identify yourself to them. And if you fail to do so, you will be subject to arrest and legal sanctions, just like anyone else would be if they failed to identify themselves to you. So folks, in closing anyways, prayers and condolences to the families and friends and co-workers of those slain officers in Moncton. I hope you see that the Free Man movement is in no way supportive of such actions. We do not advocate it, we do not promote it. We are strongly against violence, and we espouse using logic, reason, compassion, truth in order to find a peaceful, positive social change. Keep you guys in my prayers.